The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host, guest, random reptoid, or chupacabra may not necessarily reflect those of AM 950 Radio, its affiliates, or its sponsors. Now, it's time to step into the unknown. The best of GhostBox Radio with Greg Bakun.
This is the best of GhostBox Radio with Greg Bakun on AM 950. Tonight we're going to play parts of interviews from 3 different guests. We've had some amazing people appear on the show, and we think that they should be heard from again. Enjoy the show. We are talking with Chaplain Jodi Dehn, and we are talking about her new book, Angel Trippin. It's your guide to angel adventures, and it's been out for a couple months. It seems like it's being received very well, Jodi.
I couldn't be happier because it wasn't something I'd planned on doing. And we talked at the beginning of the show, it was one of those things where the angels actually had to come through a good friend and say, where's the book? And that's what prompted me to write it. And I'm really glad that I did. And everybody does seem to be enjoying it, which I'm really glad about, because sometimes, there's a lot of books about angels out there. And it's not that they're bad books, but they kind of end up repeating, from one book to another, which again, there's nothing wrong with that. It just solidifies and confirms everything. But with this one, I tried to, bring it to people in a little different way. And that is through the venue of travel. And my husband and I are avid travelers, and so it was perfect.
That is amazing. And you're right. And I do like a lot of books about angels as well. Absolutely. But this is a unique take on it. But it's applicable for people no matter what, and that's what I like about it.
Right, because we're all on a life journey. We're all traveling through our own time and space continuum, if you will, as part of our soul life. And so, yeah, it's just kind of what alliteration you want to use for it.
Absolutely. Now, just going to the comments real fast, get you up to date, Jodi, and what's been being said out there. Joanne is just saying, and who is this sweet lady? Huh? How nice is that? She looks a lot more Joanne, she looks a lot more comfortable than I do, that's for sure. I mean, do you have a drink over there? I mean, it just seems like you need, whether it's a glass of wine or hot chocolate, it looks like you are just ready for, are you going to watch a movie while we're talking or something? I mean, you look so relaxed over there.
No, it's a lot more fun to sit here and talk to you, Greg.
Sure. Yeah, sure. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Heather Ann says, this book sounds amazing. And it is amazing. And for those who want to, you can get it through Amazon, right? Is there other places you prefer people to go to get the book?
Well, I think probably the 2 most common ones that people have been using are Amazon and Barnes and Noble. It is available in 14 countries. And so basically all you have to do is just Google Angel Trippin, Your Guide to Angel Adventures, and all of your options are going to pop up. But Amazon and Barnes and Noble for sure.
That is great. That is fantastic. Annette says that she likes the subject matter and she likes you. She also says that she likes the title of the book. It sounds very youthful. And I guess maybe it's Trippin. That's what it kind of sounds like to me. Trippin, Angel Trippin. I like that. It is fun. It's a fun title.
Well, and hopefully people think that it's a fun book. The comments that I've heard is people do think it's fun because it is like an adventure to read it, but it also will, help people to realize some of their angel adventures. I know I had one person who'd read the book message me on Facebook and say that she has to go back now and start thinking about her life and some of the things that have happened, because she believes that she's had angels there at different points in time and never realized it. And I think that is what a lot of people will find after they've read the book is, oh my gosh, there were angels talking to me here and there were angels talking to me there. And maybe I should have listened to them this time, and I didn't, because I did that enough times. They talked to me and I just poo-pooed them.
Nope.
And did my old thing.
we were talking in the last segment about smells and stuff, and Annette says, "So I periodically smell brewed coffee. That's an angel sign." Why not? If you like it, why not? I don't know. Well, and
Right?
don't they say though, Jody, that if there is no coffee being brewed, but you smell it, that's a sign of a stroke coming? No, I don't know. I don't know what that is, but it's interesting. Annette says that she has a question about smells, but does not put the question in there. So if you can, Annette, go ahead, ask your question, put it in the comments. We'll do so. But Jody, I wanted to ask you a question when we're talking about, and I'm kind of fascinated by the look of the angels, because we have these preconceived notions. This a lot of wouldn't you say a lot of what we think angels look like come from like paintings around the time of the Renaissance? I mean,
Exactly.
do angels have wings?
They do have wings, but they're not the way we know wings to be.
Hmm.
Exactly what they look like, I cannot tell you for sure because I have never seen an angel in that form.
Hmm.
I have seen them through sparkles. I have seen
Nice.
them through bursts of color. I have heard them. Of course, I know them because they talk to me all the time. And then a couple of times I've had with the smells. I know a lot of times when people are doing paranormal investigations, smells will come through and they will attribute it to spirits. And and this is, of course, all subjective, as you know, Greg.
Hmm.
I believe, just based on all of my research and reading and discussions with other people, that it's not actually the spirit that is bringing the smell through. It is the angel bringing the smell through, sort of via the
Like a
spirit.
conduit.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Hmm.
And it's the same thing with spirits talking. There are many, many texts and writings that say spirits do not talk. So when we hear spirits talk, whether it's through a ghost box or actually hear a voice, an audible voice, that's not the spirit. That's the angel doing the talking. Now, they're probably talking for the spirit,
Hmm.
but it's not actually the spirit. So that's another way that angels work. It's not just messages. How do I want to say it? Yes, for us, but a different avenue that they're coming through so that we're more comfortable with them. That's
Yeah.
probably the best way to put it.
Yeah. Do you think that based on how you see angels, like just your experience and how you see angels, do you think that they have decided that that is the best way that they should be presenting themselves to you? Like there's a choice, like they decide that this is how we believe that it's going to be most impactful for Jody.
Absolutely. Yeah, they're going to manifest to me or you or Annette or Joanne, all people who are
Hmm.
listening here in ways that we're going to be comfortable with, that we're going to be receptive to, that we will notice, because there there are stories people have told me stories are in my podcast of where one minute they're there as a living, breathing person like you and I are,
Hmm.
but they turn for just a split second and turn back and they're gone. I've never had that experience,
Yeah.
but I have countless stories of other people who have had that sort of an angel encounter. So, absolutely, it depends on who we are as to how the angels are going to, present themselves.
So Annette did put a little bit more to her question in the comments, and I think it's a very good question, Annette. And thank you very much for putting it in here. She and I don't know if she is talking about the coffee smell, because I kind of originally took that as kind of a joke, because a lot of people love coffee to a ridiculous degree. I personally don't, so that's why I just assumed that we're all just having. But she's like, I smell coffee, and she always associated. If I'm reading this right, Annette, so forgive me if I'm misconstruing this. I always associated the smell with my mom. Is it my imagination?
Oh, interesting. Okay. The angels are coming through with the coffee smell because, yes, you associate it with your mom. And so they are using that because that is such a familiar and safe and comfortable person for you that I would say that is why they are using the smell of coffee because that
Hmm.
association is so dear to you. Absolutely.
I remember when my dad passed, and we once we found out, we went to mom and we hung out with her for a bit, and this was like at 3, 4 in the morning, and I went to my work to pick up my laptop because I knew I wasn't going to be back at work for a while, and once I got out of my car, which was in downtown Minneapolis, there was this scent that I picked up that I immediately, without question, associated with my dad. And it stayed with me. To this day, it stayed with me. It will come through every once in a while, but it was very prevalent up until his funeral. And then after that, it dissipated quite a bit for a long time. It would come in and out. And I guess what I'm getting at here is I think, and Jodi, you tell me what you think about this. I think you have to really kind of, that's where faith comes in. If you think something is associated with somebody, it has to be what resonates with you, right? So if Annette's out there and she's like, I'm just not sure, but it's certainly something that mom would do or that I would get, that's where it's like, take it, right? I mean, I would just like, yes, absolutely.
Yes, uh, I, I, I have, what do I want to say? Angels have literally been a part of me for as long as I can remember. And so when things come through that for a minute I might stop and go, oh, wait, what?
Hmm.
And then it's like, well, why are you even hesitating? You know that's the angels that are coming through. So yes, I'm still a skeptic with things,
Yeah.
and when we go on investigations, I still will go, yeah, no, I kind of don't really think so, and I take that step back and kind of analyze it. But when it comes to the angels and messages, I really don't hesitate a whole lot anymore. And that's, I think, what people will find that the more that they open themselves up to the angels and they get comfortable with receiving the messages, what the messages are and how they're coming through, the skepticism will start to fall away.
Hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I mean, would you say it takes a leap of faith?
Yes. Yes. And in fact, so my mom, bless her heart, she's 95 years old and she's still alive, sharp as can be.
That's great.
And when something will come to mind for me that I haven't thought about like in forever, I will call her and I will say, okay, so I just thought about this and this is what I'm thinking. Was this an angel thing? And it usually was something that maybe she was right there with me, or certainly something that I talked to her about at that immediate point in time. And she will go, yes, that definitely was. And so she just confirms for me. So, there are still those times where have to, pause for a moment, but a lot of it is faith. But like I said, the more that you do it, the faith is strong and you just keep going. Thank you, angels. Thank you, angels. And that's one thing you always have to make sure that you
Yep.
do is thank your angels.
Yep. Absolutely. And I also, this is where I always like to point out as well that there is a distinct difference between faith and religion. Because I think people
Yeah.
might get a little confused or might just be like, well, I don't want to do anything religious. Faith does not mean religion. I mean, however you look at it, whatever you want to say about it in terms of the individual person, what they take from it, that's totally fine. But they are different things.
Right. Well, and one thing people have to realize is um, angels are not religious
No,
beings.
no.
Not not at all. They're found in just about every religion in the world, but they're also found in non-religious civilizations and cultures, the ancient ones that go way back, where there was no religion. And that just says that they are simply messengers for us, trying to keep us on the right path for what our soul contracts say. So
I mean,
It's nothing to do with religion.
Nothing to do with
Faith,
religion.
absolutely, not religion.
Absolutely, nope. And that's just one of the things that it takes a little bit of a paradigm shift for some people. I understand that, and that's fair. But yeah, I mean, because it's like that's and and my take on it, Jodi, is like, honestly, if that's what I have to put my faith in, is somebody who is looking out for me, somebody who is good, somebody who is in my best interest for free. Really, I mean, what's the harm? You are listening to the best of GhostBox Radio with Greg Bakun. Remember, you can hear full past episodes, see upcoming events, and order books of the authors we have on the show by going to ghostboxradio.com. Don't forget to like us over on Facebook. Look us up at GhostBox Radio with Greg Bakun. We'll be back with another guest after the break. You're listening to GhostBox Radio on AM 950.
The best of GhostBox Radio with Greg Bakun.
The main thing to talk about right now is that we have author Michael J. Worden. We've been talking about the first true crime book that he wrote back in 2013, which was The Murder of Richard Jennings, the true story of New York's first murder for hire. I want to keep saying finest murder for hire. I don't know if it is or not. But
it wasn't the finest. That's for sure.
It seemed very flawed, as we were talking about in the last segment. I mean, it just seemed, and this is why you never get involved with your family on any sort of, and really any level. But when it comes to, it's just the money brings out the worst in everybody, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And I always go back to something people say. Things were so much better in the days gone by in the past. And really, people were killing people over reasons as financial like this going way back. We weren't any better than we are today.
Michael,
we just hear about it more.
I think that's a fantastic point because I was thinking about this just in the world in general. And there are things that are truly heinous. There are things that are maybe much different than they were back then. But, because of the world not being connected as it is now, I also noticed that, there are so many bad things that have happened in the past that have simply been forgotten to time. If it never made like national attention, even stuff that did make national attention, not that this is a heinous thing, but I just think about like, what the UFO thing, the battle for Los Angeles during World War II, something like that is not necessarily known by a whole lot of people.
Right.
So
and it's good to remember these events and keep them going.
It sure is. And for those of you who don't know what that is, and you're like, why was that battle for what? Go look it up. I did an episode about it about 2 years ago. So go listen to my shows. Okay, so this is what it's come down to, Michael. I'm begging.
Hey, listen.
I'm begging people. Yeah, right.
Hey.
Please listen. All right. So, okay, a couple things that I had seen that you had noted was that you had talked about that there were some myths and legends that were kind of surrounding this, what happened here with Richard Jennings. Could you kind of go into a little bit more detail about that, please?
Yeah, so the first actual source I found that told the story, purported to tell the story at least, really delved into the case. Almost 90% of it probably either misinformation or wrong, but there was a lot of legends that seemed to crop up. And there were also some of these repeated at the time of the case. So it's a mixture of things that were happening in 1818/19, and then later on when the story is being told, decades and probably more than that later. Some of them being like, so ultimately 2 of the men are hanged in front of 20,000 people in 1819. So that's a lot of people. That was actually the population of Orange County, was 20,000. So 2 of the men were hanged. 2 of the other men had their sentences commuted to prison. And the only one who kind of got off was Hannah Teed. She was pregnant. And they allowed her to plead to a non-death penalty offense.
Okay.
She went insane and ended up drowning herself in the Hudson River
Oh my
a few
gosh.
years later.
And-
Very sad.
And if she wasn't pregnant, though, she would have hanged as well, right?
I think, but I also think that they were looking for a way out. There hadn't been a hanging in Orange County since the Revolutionary War.
Oh,
when
wow.
they hanged Claudia Smith, who was they called him the cowboy of the Ramapo. But I think they didn't want to hang a woman. They already were looking at hanging 4 men.
Yeah.
I don't think, and I understand that. But ironically, Jack Hodges is the one who testifies against everybody else, the African American man.
Yeah.
He actually turns witness against everybody. So, fascinating. I think they thought they wouldn't believe him, but it turns out that an African American man convicted the other 3 white males that were involved in this case. So,
yeah.
An interesting twist of events. But some of the legends that really popped up, for example, there was a legend that the men that were hanged, they couldn't find a place to bury them, that no cemetery would accept the body.
Oh, okay.
And so later at the end of the day, a local cemetery said, yes, you can bury them on our property, but they cannot be inside the walls of the cemetery. You can bury them on the outside of the cemetery walls, meaning in the unconsecrated ground.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And then it's rumored that late at night, after these men had been, interred into their graves, a group of men came along with giant locust stakes and drove them into the graves. Now, the only reason someone would be driving stakes into the grave goes back to old superstitions around vampires.
Yes.
And being buried in unconsecrated soil, hanged people, suicides, etc. A lot of people had very strange fears of these things. So to think they were doing that in 1819 is kind of creepy.
It is. It is. It wasn't stated as such, though, right? I mean, it's just what that everyone believes is what they believe as far as staking those corpses.
Right. And ultimately what I found out was that didn't happen.
It didn't happen. Okay.
No, they were buried privately with their families. And I'm not sure exactly what cemeteries. I couldn't find that. But probably on private. The Teeds, for example, were big farmers. They had a big farm property. They're probably buried on a property of their own. But another one that was rumored in the local papers was that one of the men had been brought back to life after he was hanged. David Dunning. He'd been seen walking around Orange County in the days following his death. Now, this turned out to be such a powerful rumor in 1819 that after a week, they went and exhumed his grave.
Yeah.
And of course, when they opened his grave, he was still lying quite dead in his coffin where he had been placed. But that had floated around, and apparently I was able to find evidence that they did attempt to revive him using galvanic experiments. So there's a hint of truth to that rumor.
There is a hint. And as Chuck says, you can't hang a man twice.
No, you can't. So I wish I could find out more about the galvanic aspect of it. That pops up in a lot of these old cases.
It's interesting. First of all, thank you to Chuck. Also, Chuck is on, I believe that's probably on my GhostBox Radio Facebook page. He's been putting up the links to go ahead and get the book, The Murder of Richard Jennings, The True Story of New York's First Murder for Hire. Also, he put up the link for Lynched by a Mob, the 1892 lynching of Robert Lewis in Port Jervis, New York, which we also did an episode of that you can go and find. And then he also put up the link for Ghost Detective.
Thank you.
Are you paying him for this? I mean,
no, no, but I appreciate hey, listen, if I can get my books out there, I'll never make it rich, but I do like knowing that they're being out there and being read.
You know what I find
by more than just my parents.
Right. Well, you know what's interesting too is that when you said that there hadn't been a hanging since the Revolutionary War in 1818, that's not that far apart, actually. That's the weird thing
So,
about that. I mean, it's far enough, but I mean, it's still like, I think about that. It's like, yeah, that was what, another, 200 years or something. No, it was what, a matter of probably 25 to 30 years,
yeah,
perhaps.
it really isn't that far away. But to them, it would have been, these would have been a big population change, and I think, and it was a big spectacle, like it would have been at those days. But let me get back to the legends real quick.
Yes.
So, in addition to the sort of that supernatural overtone, there was legends that, there was this dramatic moment on the gallows where they brought all of the condemned people, all 5, according to the articles. And, moments before they're about to be hanged, the sheriff pulls out of his pocket a piece of paper and reads that, the sentences had been commuted for, 3 of them. Well, that never happened. And, they were never taken off the gallows. They were never even brought there. But that did happen in Cooperstown at the beginning of the 1800s to a man.
Sure.
So, the sheriff waited right up till the final moment and then decided to tell him he wasn't going to hang. But he let him get really close. So
now we know where those television tropes came from.
Yes, they really did happen, apparently. But I think the most fascinating was this character of Jack Hodges, because they talk about Jack Hodges and David Conkling. Those are the 2 men that get their sentences commuted.
Yeah.
And both end up getting out of prison at some point. They do go to state prison. And David Conkling, it's rumored, was very sick, and he died shortly after getting out. And his family was so, appalled by his conviction that they changed the spelling of his name on his gravestone. And they even put the wrong date of death on his gravestone, so that you couldn't tell it was him.
Oh, wow.
Kind of a silly rumor, a little bit of truth on the gravestone part, because he died in 1840, and the 4 was wearing off of the gravestone, so it looked like 1810. So someone in the future, after he died, in the 60s, 50s, looked at his grave and saw 1810, and his last name was Conkling, but they had dropped the G, so it was Conklin on his gravestone.
Okay.
Which they tended to switch back and forth anyway. They weren't hiding anything. It was just what it was. But Jack Hodges, if I could meet one person from my books, it would be Jack. It said that when he was in prison, he found God, had this miraculous spiritual awakening, became a revered spiritual leader in the Finger Lakes region of New York, upstate New York, lived for a while in the home of William H. Seward. That would be the future President Lincoln's Secretary of State, William H. Seward.
Sure would be, yeah.
Who was from Orange County, by the way. His father was one of the commissioners on the court where Jack was convicted, Samuel Seward. And then Jack ended up going to live in Canandaigua, where when he died, they erected a monument in his honor. Now, I thought that was just so much information. How can any of that be true, let alone all of it?
Yeah.
Right? Well, Jack Hodges didn't live with William H. Seward, so that part wasn't true. However, he did live at the steward's office, or the steward's building of the Auburn Theological Seminary. So I think there was some truth. He lived with a steward. William Seward did live up in Auburn, had a place, and I think the Orange County connection was a bit much. But it turns out Jack Hodges does have quite the monument in his honor in Canandaigua, New York.
Wow.
And he did become a spiritual leader. He was one of the first inmates to be brought up to Auburn prison when it was opened. And back then, inmates weren't allowed to talk. You were supposed to be penitentiary.
Okay.
They were given a Bible. Jack couldn't read or write, but he taught himself to read with the Bible. A minister sat with him and started with "in the beginning." And not only did Jack learn to read, but he does have this, and he describes it when you read, there's books about Jack Hodges, and it's almost a supernatural awakening he has in his cell, where he becomes overcome with what the Spirit of God in Christ, and he becomes someone who's sought out. People come to the prison to visit him. and to minister with him. And when he's released, he is eventually brought into the home of a widow up in Canandaigua, where he works. He lives in her carriage house, takes care of her property. He's much older, too. He's not a young man. He attends church in the Congregational Church, First Congregational Church, and he does not sit with the African Americans. He sits with the white congregation in their rented booth, their rented pew, because back then they had to rent their pews. So he sat with the white people. The African Americans had to sit on a balcony overlooking the church. This is when slavery is legal in a lot of parts of the country.
Right.
Still.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he would minister. So families having spiritual crises, he would go to their homes to minister to them, to counsel them, to pray with them. And these were the homes of white people in Canandaigua. In fact, he didn't associate, it said, with the African American community locally, that he really kept to himself. When the home he lived in, when the widow the house was being sold, they sold it on the condition that the new owner had to keep him on, let him live in the carriage house until he died. And the new owner was a man named Myron Clark, who later went on to be a governor of New York. So he did live with someone rather prestigious, a future governor. And it's his daughter that ends up, they do put a marble monument on his grave.
You are listening to the best of GhostBox Radio with Greg Bakun. Remember, you can hear full past episodes, see upcoming events, and order books of the authors we have on the show by going to ghostboxradio.com. Don't forget to like us over on Facebook, look us up at GhostBox Radio with Greg Bakun, and finally, please consider supporting me on Patreon. We have a special, unique audio content that you'll not find anywhere else, plus special episodes. On Patreon, you can find me as GhostBox Radio with Greg Bakun. We'll be back with another guest after the break. You're listening to GhostBox Radio on AM 950.
The best of GhostBox Radio with Greg Bakun.
We have on with us tonight Les Velez. He is the author of the book The Unknown Other and the Existential Proposition of Alien Contact, a book that really is worth checking out. And he is also the co-founder and chairman of OPUS, the Organization for Paranormal Understanding and Support. Before we get back into it, Les, Brad had a question. I've never really thought about this. It's interesting. Do you think the War of the Worlds radio broadcast in 1938 was a test to see how people would react to aliens, and that's why the government has covered up so much? I'm just going to say, Les, if that was truly the test, we failed that one miserably.
Well, yeah, I my own personal feeling on that is that it probably was not a test. I don't think the government was probably blindsided by it. It was well done. It was well done. And so kudos to
Orson Welles.
Orson Welles for pulling that one off. But it also shows that, people can be taken in by this. And, you talk about false flag operations that is being talked about more recently.
Yeah.
That might be a possibility that this would be going on in order to foment some other type of reaction that will cause our government to act in a certain way, which none of us would probably like.
No.
So,
do you think, and the idea of false flags really depresses me, because it's applied to a lot of things that if that was true, that some of these things were false flags, that would really just really erodes at me. But so putting that to the side, do you think there's been any sort of alien related false flag operations or something that either is, I don't want to say cover up, because we can name those till the cows come home, but anything that might be like a false flag that is like maybe some sort of alien interference or activity or anything?
Yeah, I can't point to any one particular thing. I mean,
Yeah.
the case down in Arizona in '97.
Oh, yeah.
That they were talking that was a hologram or something that was created to see what kind of reaction would be elicited from. But I've heard stories from pilots, commercial pilots that were. This one particular pilot was coming into Prescott, Arizona, to land, and he looked down and he couldn't see anything. All he saw was this blackness, and he was above this object.
Mm-hmm.
So it was real. It was very real, and so, but there's been stories about that, and certainly our government, and without naming all the three-letter organizations,
Yeah.
has basically they had marching orders to make things difficult for us to get to the truth, and or get us going in a different direction, if you will, with regard to any of these types of things. Whether it's swamp gas,
Yeah.
whether it's Venus or the moon or something, just all kinds of crazy explanations that just to quell the interest of the populace.
Now, when you referenced Arizona, that was the one that the governor came out to talk, and then they had that alien dressed up, right?
Right.
And
that's it.
And as Brad Webb says, is that the Phoenix Lights?
Yes.
So
Phoenix Lights.
And what I only found out just recently, I had no idea about, was the fact that very same governor had turned his tune on that, and that he actually did believe that happened.
Yes.
That was aliens.
Right. Yeah, he definitely changed his tune, as you say. There's no question about it, and he's been involved with a number of documentaries now that where they've interviewed him, and he said, that was something that he regrets that he did, and that's what's happening. You're getting a lot of people like that are coming forward that are saying, or they've either had their own experience, or they certainly know that the experience is real.
Yeah, absolutely. So the book is called The Unknown Other and the Existential Proposition of Alien Contact. And within the book, there is a number of, I'm looking at chapter 5, The Experiencers of Opus. Is there any, I'm sure all of these are very powerful. Is there anything that really, a story from that really stands out to you of this is...
There's two of them that I write in that particular chapter. One was a couple from the Santa Cruz area of California.
Mm-hmm.
And they were picnicking in a state park just north of Santa Cruz. And it was getting to be dusk, and so they started to come out of the park. Well, this park is in a rather hilly area, and it overlooks the Pacific Ocean. And they noticed this light over the ocean, and it caught their attention, and it started to get bigger and bigger, until literally this thing was over their head. Well, it wasn't just a light, it was a triangular craft.
Mm-hmm.
And it was totally silent. There was no sound coming out of this thing at all. And it slowly drifted into a canyon behind them. And they noticed another light over the ocean. And this thing got bigger and bigger again until it was over their head. And this time, the first one, they felt they were looking at it. The second time, they felt it was looking at them. And so they became frightened, and they backed up underneath a big old pine tree. And this was one of the cases that I investigated as an investigator for MUFON.
Sure.
And so, I went up there and checked out this area, and they noticed some more lights. And there was 5 more lights out there. And at that point, they decided to get out of there because they were afraid this was going to be coming at them. And they started to go down this trail. Well, this trail is difficult even in daylight.
Mm-hmm.
and all of a sudden they felt like they were on automatic control, almost robotic in nature, that they kind of felt like they drifted down out of the park down to where their car was. And like I say, this trail, even in the daylight, is dark because it's highly wooded. It's a lot of stones and things like that you had to get around, but they just managed to go down through there very smoothly. And they got to their car, and that's the last thing they remember until 3 hours later, that they found themselves in a restaurant about 10 minutes north of where they were in the park. And
Wow.
They have no idea how that happened. They have no recollection whatsoever. They have chosen not to, and this was like over 30 years ago that this happened. They chose not to go through hypnotherapy. However, I got a call from them about 2 months ago. They tracked me down. Matter of fact, I live in Texas now, so I retired, and so I moved here in 2017, and they started remembering more things. And one of the things that's really interesting, and I have to tie this in to a support group meeting, because they actually came to a support group meeting, and they had a picture. They had developed a rash after this experience, and they went to a doctor. I think they went to his doctor first, and the doctor says, well, I'm not sure what it is. It's not, this place is loaded with poison oak, poison ivy, but it wasn't either one of those, and he couldn't really identify it. So then they eventually went to her doctor, and he says, well, maybe it's a reaction to something external, or something else going on. But again, I don't recognize it. So they came to this meeting, and they showed this picture of this rash, and almost without exception, the people in the group, almost all of them, had the same kind of rash at one point.
Oh boy!
Then this is where it really got interesting. One of the people in the group at that time says, I think I know what it's from. And so we're sitting there with our mouths open, and say, what? So what do you feel it is? It's a reaction to the fluid that they dip you in when they bring you on board the craft to sanitize you. Now, so
Goodness.
This call, now getting back to the call I just got from them, the woman in the couple, they used to be married back then. Now they're separated. And she has vivid memory of being dipped in a fluid. She has it just came finally bubbled up in her conscience. So, this is incredible. Absolutely incredible.
It is incredible.
So then there's another story.
Yeah.
Which again is in the book, of a couple. They were dating each other, and he was a park ranger at Sunset Beach, which is south of Santa Cruz. And they were coming back from having dinner or something, and it was like getting to be dusk. And they go by this field, because there's a lot of agricultural fields around this part of the world, and they notice this huge orange ball, reflecting this reddish orange light on the field. And it was like, the minute they saw that, they went into this kind of robotic move where they looked at it, and then they turned their head again, and then they had slowed down to see this thing, and then it's like they went back to where he was staying. And the problem with that, it was getting to be dusk, so it was around 5 something. They didn't get to where he lived for till 9 o'clock.
Wow.
So they had this missing time. So anyway, they got in his house, and it was a trailer actually, and they prepared to go to bed, and they were they were scratching their head like they couldn't figure out what had happened. Well, that night, these Greys literally came through the wall, picked him up, took him through the wall. Okay, she's observing this. They had a German Shepherd dog that was knocked out. It was totally knocked out. He was eventually brought back. He totally freaked out. It broke up their relationship, and he basically disappeared. He freaked out so much he just took off. And these are the kind of reactions that happen in some cases with people, and not all experiences are positive.
No,
they can be very negative. And people say, well, there's two camps. You got one camp that says all the aliens are good, and then the other one says they're all bad, and so I think we have a mixture, just like we have here on Earth. We got good people and we got bad people.
Yeah.
and the same thing is going on up there or wherever you can think of it's happening.
They're probably all coming from different places, right? I mean, and they have different different agendas and stuff. What you said about the Greys coming through the walls and stuff. For people who've listened long enough to this program, and a lot of you are going to know exactly where I'm going to go to here. I firmly believe, and I firmly feel like I've experienced it myself, of Greys who are able to basically camouflage themselves. That they can, and I don't think we're saying dissimilar things here, of that they can, if you call them in, they will show up, and you may not see them, but that they will, that they might be there for all you know.
Yeah, there's certainly instances of invisibility or shape shifting or giving a screen memory that it's a big owl, instead of a small gray or something like that.
Yeah.
So they have incredible capabilities to mess with our minds.
You are listening to the best of GhostBox Radio with Greg Bakun. Remember, you can hear full past episodes, see upcoming events, and order books of the authors we have on the show by going to GhostBoxRadio.com. And finally, please consider supporting me on Patreon. We have a special, unique audio content that you'll not find anywhere else, plus special episodes. On Patreon, you can find me as GhostBox Radio with Greg Bakun.